The eyes of the nation are transfixed on the Red Fort, the ramparts of which are a powerful symbol of free India.
Namaskar, I'm Anupam Kher. I'm going to tell you the story of independent India, the story of free India, through a narrative woven by the Prime Ministers of free India, leaders who look up to with great pride and to whom the world listens with attention. लाल किले से गूंज।
आज हम एक आजाद मुल्क हैं।
भारत दुनिया के देशों में एक बड़ा देश होगा। हम इतिहास बना रहे हैं।
हम भारत की जनता को मजबूत कर पाएंगे।
कारो पर्वत से लेकर गिलगित तक इसका विस्तार है। भारत के सपनों और आकांक्षाओं को पूरा करने से कोई भी बाधा अब हमें रोक नहीं सकती। जय हिंद, जय हिंद।
Friends, what does Independence Day mean to us today? Perhaps for some it's a holiday. For kids it may be the school parade. And for others it's a fleeting thought that the country got freedom today. But when I was born in this country, India had already breathed free for 8 years. So I can safely say that independent India and I shared our childhood and youth. Maybe that's why this day is so special in my life.
Where we are today is an edifice that pays homage to the proud history of the Prime Ministers of independent India.
So friends, get ready because today I am going to tell you the saga of free India through the speeches of our Prime Ministers. How their 75 Independence Day speeches have culminated into a grand celebration of our freedom.
On 16th August 1947, the first Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, hoisted the tricolour at the Red Fort and addressed the nation in an 8-minute speech.
भाइयों और बहनों, आज एक शुभ और मुबारक दिन है। जो स्वप्न हमने बरसों से देखा था, वो कुछ हमारे आंखों के सामने आ गया और ये बात तय हो गई कि हिंदुस्तान के ऊपर कोई गैर हुकूमत अब नहीं रहेगी। आज हम एक आजाद लोग हैं, आजाद मुल्क हैं।
Freedom brought with it not just partition, but poverty and a crisis of food for 40 crore people. In the division, the wheat-growing Punjab went to Pakistan and the rice-growing region to East Pakistan, that is today's Bangladesh.
For almost a decade, hunger and food shortage echoed in the speeches of India's first Prime Minister Nehru. But his views on this extremely delicate issue took the nation by surprise. Instead of stepping up food production, he laid emphasis on curbing consumption.
हमारा आपका काम है इस वक्त जो बड़े सवाल हैं, खाने का सवाल है, खाने को पैदा करना, खाने को जाया नहीं करना। जो आदमी उसको जाया करता है, जो आदमी इस वक्त दिखाने की एर फेर में दावत वगैरह में जाया करता है, वो अपने देश के खिलाफ गुनाह करता है।
There was a hue and cry for food across the nation, but Nehru put the entire blame for this on the traders.
और दूसरी परेशानी की बात यह है कि हमारे मुल्क में काफी लोग ऐसे हैं जो अब तक पैसा बनाने की कोशिश करते हैं दूसरे की मुसीबत से, चाहे वो व्यापारी हो या दुकानदार हो या और हो, खुद गर्जी में जमा करते हैं खाने का सामान ताकि ज़्यादा दाम मिले या कभी साल 2 साल बाद उन्हें ज़रूरत हो तो उसको काम में ला सकें।
Even though the 5-year plans were conceived by Nehru, he said that often the programs failed before they reached the ground or took too long to complete. But he wasn't able to hold his bureaucracy accountable despite the admission.
हम बड़े बड़े नक्शे बनाते और प्लान बनाते कि चलो भाई यहाँ सड़कें बनाने में 50 लाख रुपए या 1 करोड़ रुपए खर्च होंगे, 1 करोड़ रुपए लाओ। हमारे दफ्तरों में बड़े बड़े फाइल बनते ऊंचे, लेकिन वो सड़कें और वो विद्यालय वो नहीं बनते या अरसे बाद बनते। ये तरीका है, गवर्नमेंट जरा हल्के चलती है, मुश्किल तो यह है।
Nehru sat in this room often late into the night in quiet contemplation. For the country, he chose the socialist model of mixed economy. The government was the industrialist and the financier. To set up a private industry, a license had to be procured from the government, and so began the license Raj. While this policy opened doors for public sector growth, the private sector got marginalized.
38 industries came under government control, but compared to other nations, the standard of living kept falling. Even after a decade, basic problems remained as they were, and Nehru had no solutions for them.
आप लोग आजकल भी कुछ दिक्कतों में हैं, परेशानियों में हैं, महंगाई की कुछ तो लाचारी है, पूरी तौर से काबू की बात नहीं हमारे इस समय, हालांकि काबू में वो आएगी। कुछ इंसान की बनाई हुई, इंसान की खुदगर्जी की बनाई हुई, जो भी कुछ हो उसका सामना करना।
Nehru viewed businessmen with suspicion. He enforced many laws that stifled entrepreneurs. He also expressed his government's helplessness in taking action against black marketing. But his statement from the Red Fort astounded the nation because he said that the people of the country were just not hardworking enough.
हमारे यहाँ अभी हिंदुस्तान में काफ़ी मेहनत करने की आदत आम तौर से नहीं हुई। हमारा कसूर नहीं, आदतें ऐसी पड़ जाती हैं वाक़यात से, लेकिन बात यह है कि हम उतना काम नहीं करते जितना कि यूरोप वाले या जापान वाले या चीन वाले या रूस वाले कहीं करते हैं। ये न समझिए कि वो कौमें खुशहाल हो गईं कोई जादू से, मेहनत से हुई हैं और अकल से हुई हैं।
Nehru praised foreign nations and picked a soft policy for India's neighboring countries. It was expected that he would challenge Pakistan owing to the bloodshed in Kashmir, but he referred to it as a piece of his heart. During a visit to China, Nehru signed the Panchsheel Agreement and steered the border dispute discussion forward. On his return, the Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai slogan gained popularity. Despite this, on the 20th of October 1962, China attacked Ladakh. Nehru had expressed his misgiving on China's motives from the Red Fort just 2 months earlier, but asked the nation not to panic. India lost the war with China, but Nehru spun defeat into a victory.
हमें तकलीफ हुई, परेशानी हुई, लेकिन उसका भी नतीजा एक अच्छा हुआ। वो ये कि उसने हमें इस गफलत से निकाला और सारे मुल्क में नई हवा छिड़ी और लोग तैयार होने लगे और हर तरफ एक जोश था और एक कुर्बानी की जाती थी।
The war saw 1,500 soldiers martyred and an equal number injured. But to everyone's surprise, Nehru did not even mention their martyrdom from the Red Fort.
Nehru served as PM for 17 years, the longest tenure thus far. During his term, he established the temples of modern India. A Cambridge alumnus, Nehru considered himself out of place, a unique blend of the East and West schools of thought. Maybe that's why he advocated a Russian socialist outlook, even while he sported an indigenous achkan and cap, and was probably the reason why he has as many admirers as critics.
On the 27th of May 1964, India's first Prime Minister died suddenly.
After Nehru's demise, Lal Bahadur Shastri took over the reins of the nation. Shastri was convinced that we needed to move away from centralized schemes and price control. He focused on agriculture, private enterprise, and foreign investment were given impetus. He kick-started the White Revolution and the Green Revolution.
Meanwhile, the Indo-Pak War of 1965 established Shastri's credentials as a strong-willed national leader. From the ramparts of the Red Fort, he warned Pakistan of the dire consequences of hostilities against India. He was unambiguous. It was Shastri who gave the country the inspirational slogan of Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan.
आज समय है, कोई हमें आराम का वक्त नहीं। आज एक त्याग का, बलिदान का, कुर्बानी का जो भी रास्ता हो, वो हमें अख्तियार करने के लिए तैयार रहना हो। और मैं आपकी तरफ से ये कहने वाला हूँ और कहना चाहता हूँ कि कश्मीर का एक टुकड़ा भी पाकिस्तान को मिलने वाला नहीं है।
Pakistan lost the war and was compelled to discuss the terms of settlement. On January 10, 1966, Shastri and the Pakistan President Ayub Khan signed a peace agreement in Tashkent. But shockingly, the very next day, Shastri breathed his last. It was reported that he had died of a heart attack.
Shastri spoke from the Red Fort only twice. A leader who felt the pulse of the nation and was just beginning to bring the country back on track had gone. The enigma of his death still remains one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in the country.
The history of independent India took a new turn. The first woman Prime Minister took charge.
Pandit Nehru's daughter Indira Gandhi's soft-spoken manner prompted her own party members to call her a gungi gudiya or a mute doll. But hidden behind this facade was an iron will, a determination and unbridled ambition that no one had gauged at that time.
As soon as she came to office, Indira nationalized 14 private banks. Political pressures began to mount on the banking sector. This gradually gave rise to crony capitalism. But even Indira did not have a resolution for the issue of food scarcity and its black marketing. Like Nehru, her displeasure was directed at traders too.
जो हमारे उद्योगपति हैं या हमारे और धनी कारोबार चलाने वाले हैं, उनसे भी कुछ अनुरोध करना होता है। अगर वो चाहते हैं कि ये अनुशासन हो, तो उनकी भी कुछ जिम्मेदारी है। उनकी जिम्मेदारी है कि बड़े-बड़े मुनाफे, ऊंचे-ऊंचे वेतन अगर वो बढ़ाते जाएंगे, तो ये अनुशासन रखना फिर आसान नहीं रहता।
During her tenure, Indira adopted Nehru's policies of state control over enterprise. The government ran hotels, manufactured scooters, tractors, refrigerators and watches. They even started to sell bread, aerated drinks and fruit concentrate. In the 1970 budget, the personal tax rate was hiked by 11%. Those earning more than 2 lakh rupees were taxed at 93.5%. Wealth creation had almost become a crime. Despite this, Indira shifted the blame of rising prices on the dealers.
कभी-कभी कोई किसी चीज की कमी होती है तो उसके दाम बढ़ते हैं और वो समझा जाता है। लेकिन कभी-कभी एक वस्तु पे टैक्स लगता है और दूसरी वस्तुओं जिनका जरा भी उससे संबंध नहीं है, उनके दाम भी बढ़ जाते हैं। कौन बढ़ाता है? क्यों बढ़ते हैं?
I clearly remember the period from 1971 to 72. At that time, I lived in Shimla, which was the headquarters of the Army Western Command. Suddenly on 3rd December, we got news that Pakistan had conducted airstrikes on Indian air bases. The Third Indo-Pak War had been declared. I can never forget the sound of sirens and the blackouts during this time.
These were 2 crucial years for Indira's diplomacy and politics. She formed a new Congress and won the elections. She split Pakistan and created Bangladesh.
Once known as the mute doll, she had transformed into an iron lady. It's a different matter that the expenses from the war weighed very heavily on the government treasury. What was surprising was that even 27 years after independence, the day-to-day problems of the people remained as they were. Inflation was now hitting an all-time high.
Inflation and unemployment led to agitations across the country. There were violent protests, and the army had to be called in to control the situation. Meanwhile, Indira was accused of electoral fraud. The court ruled against her 1971 election win. On 26 June 1975, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi declared a state of national emergency. In her speech from the Red Fort, she justified the imposition of emergency, calling it a bitter pill that must be swallowed.
हमने जब से यह आपातकाल की घोषणा की, कोई खुशी से नहीं की, जैसे मैंने आपसे कहा, लेकिन ऐसी स्थिति उत्पन्न हुई थी कि हम मजबूर हो गए। कहते हैं कि हर काले बादल के पीछे रोशनी होती है, वैसे कभी-कभी एक कठोर कदम भी लेना हो, जैसे बीमारी में कड़वी दवा भी पीनी पड़ती है।
I distinctly remember the emergency period. The power supply was shut down in Delhi. Censorship was imposed on the media. Key opposition leaders were arrested and put behind bars. People's fundamental rights were stripped. There was a violation of human rights as well. The emergency lasted almost 19 months and remains one of the darkest chapters in the history of Indian democracy. Indira eventually suspended the emergency and called for fresh elections. The results showed a clear mandate. The Congress suffered a crushing defeat.
For 3 years, the Indian political scenario remained unstable. The country saw 2 prime ministers in this period. In 1977, Morarji Ranchhodji Desai was sworn into office. He became the first non-Congress Prime Minister of independent India to unfurl the national flag at Red Fort. Within no time, a tussle ensued within his party and the Morarji government collapsed. With Indira's support, Charan Singh took charge. But his government did not last long either.
In 1980, Indira Gandhi returned to power. At this time, the Khalistan movement in Punjab was at its peak. Separatist Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale was demanding Khalistan a separate Sikh country. Bhindranwale, along with armed comrades, invaded and captured the Golden Temple of Amritsar.
To drive the separatists out of the Golden Temple, Indira launched Operation Blue Star, ordering military action. Parts of the temple suffered heavy damage, and 450 people died. This angered the Sikh community a great deal. On 31st October 1984, the country saw the ugly face of terrorism. In her own home at 1 Safdarjung Road, Indira Gandhi's security guards, Beyant Singh and Satwant Singh, opened fire, unleashing a barrage of bullets. India lost yet another prime minister. After the political storms of the Indira years, her son Rajiv Gandhi took charge at the helm. A pilot by profession, 40-year-old Rajiv became the youngest Prime Minister of India. But there was another storm brewing on the horizon. Following Indira's assassination, anti-Sikh riots broke out in parts of the country, including Delhi. More than 3,000 people lost their lives.
Rajiv Gandhi remarked on the violence, saying that when a big tree falls, the earth shakes a little. He was indirectly justifying the violence that took place after the death of his mother. In his first speech from the Red Fort, Rajiv Gandhi cited his mother Indira Gandhi's accomplishments.
पिछले 38 साल में हमने बहुत तरक्की करी। इंदिरा जी ने और भी जोर लगाया गरीबी हटाने में। पिछले 5 साल में उन्होंने 49% से करीब करीब 63% तक भारत की जनता को गरीबी रेखा से ऊपर कर दिया।
There is an interesting anecdote about the Prime Minister's speeches from the Red Fort, which not many people are aware of. Until 1986, Prime Ministers had never read out a written speech. They would refer to key points they noted on paper. But in his 1986 speech, Rajiv Gandhi referred to Independence Day as Republic Day. Thereafter, Rajiv Gandhi started reading out a written speech.
In his speeches, Rajiv gave hope. In preparing India for the 21st century, he laid emphasis on technology. For the first time, telecom, automobiles, computers, television received attention, and technical jobs were created.
He also took steps to curb the rampant corruption in the country. Owing to this, the media gave him the title of Mr. Clean. But alas, Mr. Clean himself was charged with corruption.
In his 1988 speech, Rajiv Gandhi surprised the audience by stating that if the government sends 1 rupee, only 15 paise reaches the public. He was referring to his own government and bureaucrats.
But in his enthusiasm during his speech, he also said something that stunned the nation.
पहली बार हमें दूसरों के दरवाजे पे बर्तन लेके पहुंचना नहीं पड़ा था। ये गौरव की बात है, ये शान की बात है और ये हम कर पाए हैं क्योंकि 40 साल से जो पंडित जी ने, इंदिरा जी ने काम किया था, उसका नतीजा आज हमारे सामने है।
The Bofors case allegations, inflation, and other issues brought people out onto the streets in protest against the Rajiv Gandhi government. Sensing the unrest, on 9th November 1989, Rajiv Gandhi authorized the Vishwa Hindu Parishad to unlock the doors of the disputed Ram Temple in Ayodhya. But by this time, the Hindu vote bank had already turned to the BJP.
Invoking the political legacy of the Nehru and Gandhi family from the ramparts of Red Fort, in the election year once again, Rajiv tried to divert the charge towards capitals. Like Nehru and Indira, he lashed out at the traders.
इंदिरा जी ने अपना पूरा जीवन लगा दिया समाजदार शक्तियों की लड़ाई में, उनका सामना करने में, उन्हें खत्म करने में। आजाद भारत में भी धन अमीरों के हाथ में से ही निकल रहा था, अमीरों के हाथ में ही जा रहा था। इंदिरा जी ने बैंकों का राष्ट्रीयकरण करके ये बदला। उन्होंने देश का धन भारत के गरीबों के काम में लगाया, भारत की गरीबी हटाने में लगाया, भारत के गरीबों को ऊपर उठाने में लगाया।
Strategies and appeals did not work, nor did promises and claims. The Congress lost the election.
Once a pilot in the Indian Airlines, Rajiv considered himself a reluctant politician. More than politics, he loved fast cars and the engineering hidden within them. Although he was instrumental in bringing about a technological revolution in the country, the corruption scandals in his last years dimmed his accomplishments.
On 21st May 1991, while campaigning in Tamil Nadu for the next round of parliamentary elections, a woman with links to the extremist LTTE approached Rajiv Gandhi with a bouquet. A powerful explosion followed in what turned out to be a suicide attack. Rajiv Gandhi died on the spot.
നെഞ്ചിടിപ്പിലെ ഈ മണ്ണടുക്കിലെ പടജ്വാലയായി എൻ നെഞ്ചിടിപ്പിലെ തുടിതൻ താളമായി ഈ മണ്ണടുക്കിലെ പടജ്വാലയായി തുടിക്കും കോടി കോടി നാഡി പുഷ്പം പൂവാടിയാ ഒരേ ഇന്ത്യ ഒരേ ജനത ഒരേ ശ്വാസമായി ഉദിക്കുന്നു ഉലകത്തിനു മേലെ നെഞ്ചിടിപ്പിലെ തുടിതൻ താളമായി ഈ മണ്ണടുക്കിലെ പടജ്വാലയായി എൻ നെഞ്ചിടിപ്പിലെ തുടിതൻ താളമായി ഈ
In its 44 years of independence, two powerful national leaders had been assassinated. These brutal incidents sent the country into a state of political trauma. But once again, the political landscape of India saw the rise of a new Prime Minister, one who made corruption a matter of national politics.
Raja Vishwanath Pratap Singh, or VP Singh of Manda, gathered a majority by forming a united front comprising the left and right. He became the 7th Prime Minister of India. In his 1990 speech, VP Singh talked about implementing the recommendations of the Mandal Commission report. In addition to the SC/ST, a new category, that is other backward classes or OBC, was created. As a result, reservations totaled 49.5%. Across the country, youth protests broke out. Many students even committed suicide. The agitation against the Mandal Commission recommendations shook the government and altered the political status quo. Barely a month later, senior BJP leader Lal Qiley commenced his historic Rath Yatra from Somnath in Gujarat to the Ram Temple. This was Advani's Kamandal in response to VP Singh's Mandal. VP Singh's coalition government did not last long. With the support of the Congress, Chandrasekhar became the next Prime Minister. Within 7 months, the Congress withdrew its support and the government collapsed.
When the next Prime Minister took over the reins, the country was in financial turmoil. The first Prime Minister from South India, P.V. Narasimha Rao, had a huge challenge ahead of him. By this time, the heat from the Ram Mandir movement had won BJP 120 seats. In response to Advani's Rath Yatra, Prime Minister Rao in his 1992 speech made a commitment from the Red Fort that took the country by surprise.
हमारी ये इच्छा है, हमारी ये नीति है कि वहाँ मंदिर बने, भव्य मंदिर बने, लेकिन मस्जिद न टूटे। ये हमारा फार्मूला है, ये हमारा निश्चय है और ये हमारा फैसला है।
6th December 1992 marked the most crucial event in Rao's tenure. Hindu organizations including the Vishwa Hindu Parishad and the Sant Samaj demolished the disputed Babri Masjid structure. Communal violence broke out across the country. And in March 1993, Mumbai was jolted by 12 serial bombings. The entire country was in shock. Pakistan-based most wanted terrorist Dawood Ibrahim had organized these attacks.
At the same time in Kashmir, Pakistan with the help of ISI and Kashmiri separatists was aiding terrorist infiltration into the valley. The Kashmiri Hindus and the government machinery became the target of a proxy war. Kashmiri Pandits had to leave everything behind and live outside the valley as refugees with no choice.
हमें आगे बहुत कुछ करना है कश्मीर के सिलसिले में। और जो पाकिस्तान एक तरफ प्रचार करता है कि ह्यूमन राइट्स का वहाँ वायलेशन हो रहा है, मानवीय अधिकारों का उल्लंघन हो रहा है। अभी 2 दिन पहले वहाँ के आतंकवादियों ने एक बस को बीच में रोका और उसमें 16-17 आदमियों को उतारकर उन लोगों को गोली मार दी। इनके गोली के जो शिकार हुए, क्या उनके मानवीय अधिकार नहीं है? उनको जिंदा रहने का हक नहीं है? ये केवल इन्हीं आतंकवादियों को है।
Prime Minister Rao admitted that in Kashmir the Hindus were being targeted and tormented, but took no concrete steps to prevent it. Today, when Kashmir Files is in the news, it's important to mention that there was a section of people, and still is, that are not ready to accept that there was violence against the Kashmiri Pandits. The Narasimha Rao government gave the country's economy a new dimension. Nehru's mixed economy was transformed into an open market system. License Raj came to an end and foreign direct investment opened up. However, Rao's achievements during his tenure in office were obscured by many scandals. The 5,000 crore stock market scam, along with many other scams, were laid bare, and under Rao's leadership, the Congress lost elections.
From 1996 to 1998, the United Front's coalition politics again pushed the country towards instability. H.D. Devagowda and then I.K. Gujral served as prime ministers in quick succession. Within 3 years, 2 United Front governments fell, and once more, the Lok Sabha was dissolved. Yet again, another round of mid-term elections followed.
On the political horizon of the country, Atal emerged next. It was Atal Bihari Vajpayee's personality and charisma that to form the BJP government, he garnered the support of 24 parties. It was Vajpayee's dynamic leadership that held them all together to run the NDA government. The Vajpayee government entry was also rather explosive.
In May 1998, the world shook as India conducted 5 underground nuclear tests in Rajasthan's Pokhran. The tests established India as a nuclear power, but in his first speech from the Red Fort, Vajpayee said something that had never been said before.
25 वर्ष पूर्व श्रीमती इंदिरा गांधी ने जिस कार्य की नींव रखी थी, मैंने उस पर इमारत खड़ा करने का प्रयास किया है.
Validating his statesmanship, Vajpayee attributed this landmark achievement to the foundation laid by the Prime Minister of the opposition party. In the same speech, Vajpayee bluntly told Pakistan that the border of India extends to POK, meaning Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
लद्दाख से लेकर निकोबार तक फैला हुआ है ये देश. गारो पर्वत से लेकर गिलगित तक इसका विस्तार है. ये एक प्राचीन देश है. इसकी सभ्यता और संस्कृति 5000 वर्ष से भी अधिक पुरानी है.
Along with chiding Pakistan, Prime Minister Vajpayee made a grand diplomatic gesture. On 19th of February 1999, a bus service was launched between Delhi and Lahore. Vajpayee himself took the bus across the border. He was received by Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. To resolve the Kashmir dispute and other matters with Pakistan, the Lahore Declaration was signed.
Just 2 months later, in the Kargil sector of Jammu and Kashmir, the Pakistani army infiltrated and captured the area. In the battle that lasted from May till July, India besieged the Pakistani army and infiltrators and completely uprooted them. In the final days of the government, Vajpayee was under a lot of pressure from supporting parties. Despite this, even on his way out, he made invaluable contributions to the country. In 2003, the Chandrayaan mission was greenlit. In Delhi, he initiated the metro project, and the road and telecommunications network put India on the fast track to development.
In May 2004, the BJP lost the electoral battle. The Congress came to power with support from the left, but party chief Sonia Gandhi refused to become Prime Minister, citing her foreign origin. Ignoring senior party leaders, she picked a technocrat, Manmohan Singh, to be the Prime Minister. With inflation rising, the UPA government was targeted. But like Nehru and Indira Gandhi, Manmohan Singh provided a peculiar reason.
हमें ये बात समझनी होगी कि यदि हम चाहते हैं कि हमारे किसानों की आमदनी बढ़े तो उनकी पैदा की गई वस्तुओं की कीमतें कुछ ना कुछ बढ़ेंगी ही। जब समाज के दूसरे वर्गों की आमदनी बढ़ती है तो हमारे किसानों की आमदनी क्यों ना बढ़े।
One key to Manmohan Singh's government lay in the hands of the coalition partners. With the support of the left, economic reforms were a challenge. On the other side, to guide the UPA government, Sonia Gandhi formed the National Advisory Council and appointed herself chairperson. It was the first time that the Prime Minister for directions on governance and policy making had to go to the party president for validation. It was also for the first time that a PM was citing the name of the ruling party president from the Red Fort.
हमारी पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री श्रीमती इंदिरा गांधी जी ने कहा था गरीबी हटाओ। हमारी नेता श्रीमती सोनिया गांधी ने हमें नारा दिया है रोजगार बढ़ाओ।
26th November 2008, I was in Mumbai that day. Around 8:30 p.m., the news that came shook me up badly. 2 famous Mumbai hotels had been attacked by 10 terrorists. 180 people or more were killed, and about 800 people were badly injured. The whole country and the whole world witnessed this horrific incident. In 2009, Manmohan Singh became Prime Minister again. In his Red Fort speech, he made a mention of the incident, but didn't pay tribute to the martyrs.
मुंबई में पिछले नवंबर में हुए भयानक आतंकी हमले के बाद हमारी सरकार ने इसके खिलाफ कई कदम उठाए। आतंकी गतिविधियों को ख़त्म करने के लिए हमारी इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसी और सुरक्षा बलों को लगातार बेहतर बनाया जा रहा है। मुझे यकीन है कि समाज के सभी तबकों के भरपूर सहयोग से हम अपने देश से आतंकवाद को ख़त्म करने में ज़रूर कामयाब होंगे।
The economy grew the fastest during the tenure of Manmohan Singh. But the terrorist attacks, the 2G scam, CWG scam, Augusta helicopter scandal, one after another angered people, and citizens took to the streets in protest.
Despite the growing list of scams, Dr. Manmohan Singh did not have a solution for corruption. The people of the country, through the 2014 general elections, gave a mandate that would continue to echo till far and for a very long time. 26th May 2014, in a grand ceremony at Rashtrapati Bhavan, for the first time, the son of a tea stall owner born in independent India, Narendra Damodar Das Modi, was sworn in as the Prime Minister, giving Free India a leader whose policies and strategies would always be centered on India's 140 crore citizens.
2 months after taking oath as the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi delivered his first speech from the Red Fort. Like Vajpayee, he commended all the former Prime Ministers for their contributions to building India.
आजादी के बाद देश आज जहां पहुंचा है उसमें इस देश के सभी प्रधानमंत्रियों का योगदान है।
On Mahatma Gandhi's 150th birth anniversary, PM Modi launched the world's largest sanitization program in the country. The cleanliness campaign became a mission for PM Modi, the likes of which had never been seen before. He took the broom in his own hands to clean up and began a mass movement.
A believer in practice before you preach, Narendra Modi's actions aimed to empower people on the bottom rung of society, those who had no bank account. He declared that he would go beyond promises and focus on implementation.
कौन सरकार होगी जो योजना नहीं बनाती होगी? हर कोई बनाते हैं। कौन सरकार होती है जो घोषणाएं नहीं करती? हर कोई करती है। कौन सरकार होती है जो उद्घाटन के दिए न जलाती हो, फीता न काटती हो? सब कोई करते हैं। लेकिन कसौटी इस बात पे होती है कि हम जिन बातों को करते हैं उसको पूरा करते हैं कि नहीं करते।
Modi set up the SIT to recover black money stashed overseas. Schemes like Make in India, Startup India, and Digital India were promoted. These reforms were steps taken to eradicate corruption. Next, his focus shifted to an area that had been long ignored: the empowerment and upliftment of women.
LPG के गैस कनेक्शन गरीब परिवारों को देने का हमने बीड़ा उठाया है। उज्ज्वला योजना के तहत मेरी गरीब मां को चूल्हे के धुएं से मुक्ति दिलाने का अभियान बहुत तेजी से चलाया है। और बेटी बचाओ बेटी पढ़ाओ में हमने जो इनिशिएटिव लिए हैं उसमें अभी भी मुझे समाज के सहयोग की आवश्यकता है। घर में एक महिला भी अगर शिक्षित है, शारीरिक रूप से सशक्त है, आर्थिक रूप से स्वतंत्र है, एक महिला गरीब से गरीब परिवार को भी गरीबी से बाहर निकालने की ताकत रखती है।
Whenever our Indian democracy ascends, it invites obtrusion from our neighbor Pakistan. Prime Minister Modi repeatedly warned Pakistan without naming them. He used language that was befitting for them. Taking Vajpayee's legacy forward, in his 2016 speech from the Red Fort, he bluntly declared that POK was a part of India.
मैं आज लाल किले की प्राचीर से बलूचिस्तान के लोगों का, गिलगिट के लोगों का, पाक के कब्जे वाले कश्मीर के लोगों का मैं आज तहे दिल से आभार व्यक्त करना चाहता हूं।
September 2016, an Indian army camp in the Uri sector of Jammu and Kashmir was attacked by Pakistan-based terrorists. 19 Indian soldiers were martyred. Just 10 days later, Modi sent a strong military response. Indian special forces entered POK and destroyed the training camps of the terrorists.
On 15th August 2017, in his address to the nation from the Red Fort, Modi talked about the new India, a nation that can defend itself as well as strike back.
हमारा देश, हमारी सेनाएं, हमारे वीर पुरुष, उन्होंने जब जब मौका आया है अपना कर्तव्य दिखाया, अपना सामर्थ्य दिखाया है। बलिदान की पराकाष्ठा करने में ये हमारे वीर कभी पीछे नहीं रहे हैं। और जब सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक हुई, दुनिया को हमारा लोहा मानना पड़ा।
നെഞ്ചിടിപ്പിലെ തുടിതം താളമായി ഈ മണ്ണടുക്കിലെ പടഹജ്വാലയായി എൻ നെഞ്ചിടിപ്പിലെ തുടിതൻ താളമായി ഈ മണ്ണടുക്കിലെ പടഹജ്വാലയായി തുടിക്കും കോടി കോടി നാഡി പുഷ്പം പൂവാടിയായി ഒരേ ഇന്ത്യ ഒരേ ജനത ഒരേ ശ്വാസമായി ഉദിക്കുന്നു ഉലകത്തിനു മേലെ. ജിടിപ്പിലെ തുടിതൻ താളമായി ഈ മണ്ണടുക്കിലെ പടഹജ്വാലയായി നെഞ്ചിടിപ്പിലെ തുടിതൻ താളമായി ഈ മണ്ണടുക്കിലെ പടഹജ്വാലയായി തുടിക്കും കോടി കോടി നാഡി പുഷ്പം പൂവാടിയായി ഒരേ ഇന്ത്യ ഒരേ ജനത ഒരേ ശ്വാസമായി ഉദിക്കുന്നു ഉലകത്തിനു മേലെ.
In 2016, Prime Minister Modi made another historic move. This time, he organized a surgical strike on the nation's black money. On 8th November at 8 p.m., Prime Minister Modi announced demonetization on national television. 500 and 1,000 rupee currency notes became worthless overnight. Surprisingly, even the most senior ministers in his cabinet had no inkling of this move.
In 2017, the Modi government formulated the strategy for ease of doing business and implemented a single tax system, namely GST. In 2018, the world's biggest healthcare scheme, Ayushman Bharat, was launched, providing free health insurance cover of up to 5 lakh rupees to 50 crore poor.
14th February 2019, I was leaving from Dehradun after wrapping a film shoot when we got news of another act by Pakistan. On the Jammu-Srinagar National Highway in Pulwama, a CRPF convoy was attacked with a vehicle carrying RDX. In this suicide attack, 40 of our brave soldiers were martyred.
Jaish-e-Mohammed, a terrorist organization operating from Pakistan, claimed responsibility for the attack. Modi gave the military establishment a free hand to respond suitably. On 26th February, Indian Air Force fighter jets carried out airstrikes, destroying terror camps situated in Balakot, Pakistan.
Prime Minister Modi, in the first 5 years of his tenure, demonstrated to the world that India was firmly on the path of nationalism.
In the 2019 elections, India reposed faith in Modi's leadership again, and the BJP formed the government with absolute majority. Narendra Modi took oath as the Prime Minister for the second term.
In their second term, the Modi government made history. In Parliament, they passed a resolution to repeal Section 370 that gave special status to Jammu and Kashmir. In the history of India, for the first time, the tricolour soared from the Kashmir Legislative Assembly to Lal Chowk.
जो काम पिछले 70 साल में नहीं, नई सरकार बनने के बाद 70 दिन के भीतर आर्टिकल 370 और 35A को हटाने का काम भारत की दोनों सदनों ने, राज्यसभा और लोकसभा ने 2/3 बहुमत से पारित कर और जम्मू कश्मीर और लद्दाख के नागरिकों की आशा आकांक्षा पूरी हो, ये हम सबका दायित्व है.
While previous administrations shunned trade, enterprise, and industry, Prime Minister Modi gave due credit to India's wealth creators.
हमारे देश में कुछ ऐसी गलत मान्यताओं ने घर कर लिया है। उन मान्यताओं से बाहर निकलना पड़ेगा। जो देश की वेल्थ को क्रिएट करता है, जो देश के वेल्थ क्रिएशन में कंट्रीब्यूट करता है, वे सब देश की सेवा कर रहे हैं। हम वेल्थ क्रिएटर को आशंका की नजरों से न देखें, हम उनके प्रति हीन भाव से न देखें। आवश्यकता है देश में वेल्थ क्रिएट करने वालों का भी उतना ही मान सम्मान और प्रोत्साहन होना चाहिए, उनका गौरव बढ़ना चाहिए। और वेल्थ क्रिएट नहीं होगी तो वेल्थ डिस्ट्रीब्यूट भी नहीं होगी। अगर वेल्थ डिस्ट्रीब्यूट नहीं होगी तो देश के गरीब आदमी की भलाई नहीं होगी।
Year 2020. It's a year we will never forget. India and the rest of the world was in the grip of COVID. In the midst of the pandemic, Modi not only took multiple steps to boost the spirit of frontline workers, but made every attempt to propel the country's economy forward.
While the pandemic was peaking, on the 5th of May 2020, a violent clash broke out between Chinese and Indian army troops in Ladakh. 20 Indian soldiers were killed in action. China also suffered heavy losses. In his 2020 speech, Prime Minister Modi saluted the Indian martyrs of Galwan, sending a strong message to China.
भारत की संप्रभुता की रक्षा के लिए पूरा देश एक जोश से भरा हुआ है, संकल्प से प्रेरित है और सामर्थ्य पर अटूट श्रद्धा के साथ आगे बढ़ रहा है। इस संकल्प के लिए हमारे वीर जवान क्या कर सकते हैं, देश क्या कर सकता है, ये लद्दाख में दुनिया ने देख लिया। मैं आज मातृभूमि पर न्योछावर उन सभी वीर जवानों को लाल किले की प्राचीर से आदरपूर्वक नमन करता हूं।
The corona pandemic shook the world. Not for 100 years had the world witnessed anything like it. But India did not lose courage. When developed countries like America, Russia and China were looking for relief, it was India that sent medicines to more than 150 countries. Not only this, in 10 months, 100 crore vaccine doses were administered to the people of the country.
India's vaccine diplomacy was exemplary. The Covishield and Covaxin doses for global and domestic distribution were made in India.
लेकिन आज गौरव से कह सकते हैं कि दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा वैक्सीनेशन प्रोग्राम हमारे देश में चल रहा है। 54 करोड़ से ज्यादा लोग वैक्सीन डोज लगा चुके हैं। कोविन जैसी ऑनलाइन व्यवस्था, डिजिटल सर्टिफिकेट देने की व्यवस्था आज दुनिया को आकर्षित कर रही है।
"15 prime ministers have led India since independence. Addressing the nation from the ramparts of the Red Fort, they presented their vision for the nation. But an in-depth analysis of the tone, topics, and narratives of their speeches provides interesting insights about each individual and their priorities. While Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi were charismatic leaders, their speeches were bereft of data and details. Both adopted a condescending and chiding tone towards the people and spoke more about problems rather than solutions. Both also viewed the business community with suspicion. On the contrary, Shastri came out as a compassionate and resolute leader with a robust vision for the nation. Rajiv Gandhi's speeches revealed his vision for the future, but were also devoid of detail and were often condescending in tone. Though a lawyer and an agriculturist, P.V. Narasimha Rao gave wings to economic development. While he acknowledged cross-border terrorism, he could not deal with it decisively. Manmohan Singh was acclaimed as a thinker and scholar. Yet, his speeches lacked inspiration and insight and sounded bureaucratic. In his praise of Sonia Gandhi, who held no position in government, he came across as subservient. Vajpayee powered reforms across sectors and recognized people's role in preserving democracy. Both he and Modi graciously acknowledged the contributions of their predecessors. Prime Minister Modi's speeches are inspiring and motivational. He uses the platform to announce new initiatives with specific targets pegged to national challenges. His speeches are rich in data and provide updates on earlier announcements. Modi celebrates everything Indian and has successfully taken the India story to the world.
यही समय है, सही समय है, भारत का अनमोल समय है, असंख्य भुजाओं की शक्ति है, हर तरफ देश की भक्ति है। तुम उठो, तिरंगा लहरा दो, भारत के भाग्य को फहरा दो, भारत के भाग्य को फहरा दो।
Today, the entire world is ready to give us the status of Vishwa Guru. None of this would be possible if our freedom fighters had not fought for our independence. We salute them all who fought for our right to breathe in a free India. Namaskar and Jai Hind.